You're not broken, you're awakening. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking something is inherently wrong when you observe others surrounded by camaraderie, joyous laughter, and a sense of belonging, while you find yourself in solitude, questioning why connection feels so elusive. But perhaps this silence isn't an emptiness. Perhaps it's the fertile ground where your soul finally finds its voice. You've been conditioned to believe that connection is a numbers game, that happiness scales with the size of your social circle, that an overflowing calendar equates to a full heart. Yet nobody prepared you for the reality that becoming your authentic self often requires a process of letting go. That profound growth flourishes in moments of quiet introspection, not within a bustling crowd. This isn't about social exclusion, it's about a journey of spiritual elevation. If it feels as though you're no longer understood by those around you, it could simply signify that you've evolved beyond the version of yourself they were once comfortable with. Imagine waking up one day with the unsettling realization that you no longer belong, not within your familiar group chats, not within the confines of your workplace, not even within your oldest and most cherished friendships. The activities that once elicited genuine laughter now feel hollow and superficial. Conversations that used to ignite your interest and keep you engaged late into the night now leave you feeling drained and depleted. While it might initially seem as though something is amiss, what's actually occurring is an extraordinary and transformative shift. You're evolving on an energetic level, experiencing a change in your vibrational frequency. Spiritual awakening doesn't announce its arrival with fanfare, flashing lights, or thunderous applause. Instead, it often begins with a subtle sense of disconnection. You gradually lose interest in the places and activities that once provided comfort and solace. You find yourself questioning the intrinsic value of gossip, superficial entertainment, and shallow relationships. You may even wonder why you suddenly feel like an outsider in a world that you once seamlessly fit into. This feeling of alienation arises because you're no longer attuned to the same frequency. You're now receiving a different signal, one that demands a higher level of honesty, authenticity, and presence. What many mistakenly perceive as loneliness during this phase is, in essence, a loss of resonance. You're not becoming cold or aloof, you're simply becoming more real, more aligned with your true self. And authenticity doesn't always align with the roles and expectations that others have grown accustomed to. You're no longer performing the version of yourself that made people comfortable. You begin to discern when a laugh is forced, when you're diminishing your own light to maintain peace, and when you're feigning interest solely to preserve a sense of belonging. That unsettling feeling deep within your core, that dissonance represents the inherent cost of profound spiritual growth. Some individuals will sense this shift without even consciously realizing it. They may begin to distance themselves, or you might find yourself declining invitations that you once eagerly accepted. You won't always have a clear explanation for these changes. At times, you may experience feelings of guilt, as though you're abandoning those around you. However, this process isn't about abandonment, it's about alignment. You're not moving away from others, you're moving toward your true self. This journey can feel lonely because it's unfamiliar and uncharted territory. Not many individuals around you are consciously undertaking this process, but those who are will eventually find their way to you. Spiritual awakening is often romanticized and idealized, but the reality is that the initial stages can be raw, disorienting, and even painful. The shedding of superficial connections may feel like rejection, but it's actually a form of liberation. The conversations that fall flat, the friends who gradually fade away, the social gatherings that no longer spark excitement, these aren't indicators of failure. They're signs that your energy no longer resonates with the frequency of distraction, drama, or pretense. You're being gently guided away from noise, performance, and ingrained patterns that once kept you comfortable but ultimately left you feeling numb. And you're being drawn into a quieter, more introspective space where authentic connection can truly flourish. But first, you must clear the room of all that no longer serves you. If you're experiencing the sensation of being a stranger in your own life, remember that you're not broken. You're simply perceiving reality with newfound clarity. This isn't a manifestation of depression, it's a detachment from the inauthentic. You're awakening to a deeper, more profound version of yourself, one that refuses to settle for superficiality in place of genuine meaning. This clarity will inevitably come at the cost of the comfort of fitting in. But what you relinquish in familiarity, you gain in freedom. One day you'll look back and realize that this was the pivotal moment when it all began, not when you were surrounded by a crowd, but when you stood alone, resolute and unwavering. There's a profound realization that occurs during a spiritual awakening. The most debilitating form of loneliness isn't being physically alone. It's being surrounded by individuals who are incapable of truly seeing you, of understanding your soul's yearning. You may find yourself sitting in rooms that once felt like home, only to experience a sudden and jarring sense of alienation. You hear the familiar voices, the laughter, the customary phrases, but they no longer resonate within you, not because you've become distant, but because you've undergone a profound transformation. As you delve deeper into your awakening, the mask you once wore begins to slip, revealing your authentic self. And when the mask falls away, so too does the illusion of connection. You might find yourself laughing along with everyone else, but internally you feel as though you're merely observing a performance. The painful truth is that you once played an integral role in that performance. You skillfully embodied your assigned character, effortlessly fitting in, pleasing others, and maintaining a light-hearted atmosphere. However, it now feels utterly exhausting. Your soul yearns for something more profound, something authentic, something real. That ache within your heart isn't a flaw or a weakness. It's your internal compass, guiding you away from the familiar and toward your true destiny. As you awaken, your inner world becomes increasingly vibrant and intensified. Your thoughts take on a deeper resonance. Your observations become sharper and more perceptive. You begin to notice subtle nuances that often escape the attention of others. When someone is being disingenuous, when a conversation is rooted in insecurity, and when an entire social dynamic is built upon the mutual avoidance of vulnerability. Once you become aware of these underlying dynamics, it becomes nearly impossible to feign ignorance. This is why awakening often feels like a form of exile. You're not consciously rejecting others. You're being drawn into solitude by something sacred and profound. Throughout history, solitude has served as a rite of passage for spiritual seekers. Monks retreated to monasteries, not as an escape from the world, but as an opportunity to remember their true essence without the influence of external distractions. Hermits weren't antisocial individuals, they were clarity seekers, intentionally seeking deeper truths. Even great thinkers in the West, such as Thoreau at Walden Pond, understood that society can dull the soul when we become overly immersed in its rhythms. Solitude isn't a prison, it's a sanctuary for becoming, a space where we can cultivate our authentic selves. Yet in a culture that equates loneliness with failure, choosing stillness can be perceived as a sign of collapse. People may question what's wrong with you, assuming that you're depressed, bitter, or cold. At times, you may even question yourself because society doesn't teach us how to embrace solitude. It teaches us how to be liked and accepted. However, being liked isn't synonymous with being known. Until you're willing to navigate the discomfort of being misunderstood, you'll never attain the clarity of fully embodying your authentic self. This process isn't about severing ties with everyone, it's about creating space for what's real to emerge. It's about recognizing that many of the relationships we form prior to awakening are often built upon shared illusions, status, convenience, or the avoidance of uncomfortable silences. When those illusions begin to dissipate, the connections often fade away as well. And that's perfectly acceptable. Not everyone is destined to accompany you on every stage of your journey. You're not becoming isolated, you're undergoing a process of refinement. Within that refinement, your energy begins to act as a filter, discerning what aligns with your authentic self and allowing what no longer resonates to fall away, often without drama, but with a gentle and natural distancing. People stop calling, conversations lose their momentum, invitations fade. While this may sting at times, it's not a form of rejection, it's a form of release, the universe creating space for genuine resonance to enter your life. Solitude is never truly empty when you understand what it's preparing you for. It serves as a signal, a sacred pause, an initiation into a new chapter of your life. The friendships you're destined to have, the ones built upon depth, truth, and spiritual alignment, aren't forged in the midst of chaos and noise. They emerge in the aftermath of silence. They don't come to fill a void. They arrive because you've intentionally cleared space for what's real. There comes a pivotal moment in your spiritual awakening when everything seems heightened and amplified. Sounds become sharper, lights appear harsher, and crowds drain you in a way they never did before. You can enter a room and intuitively sense the underlying tension before a single word is spoken. A song you've heard countless times may suddenly bring you to tears. You begin to perceive every subtle shift in tone, every fleeting expression, every tremor in someone's voice. This isn't a sign that you're becoming fragile. It's an indication that your senses are finally catching up to the expansion of your consciousness. You're not breaking down. You're tuning into a higher frequency. What many dismiss as hypersensitivity is actually a natural byproduct of perceiving the world with greater clarity and awareness. As the boundaries of the ego soften and the layers of distraction begin to peel away, your awareness expands, and with it, so does your capacity to feel. However, in a world that celebrates numbness through constant noise, stimulation, endless scrolling, and superficial conversation, experiencing emotions deeply can feel like a curse. No one warns you that spiritual growth also entails spiritual exposure. You don't simply see more clearly, you feel more intensely. Consequently, you may experience suffering more visibly. But this suffering isn't a form of dysfunction, it's a catalyst for profound transformation. You may find yourself withdrawing from social interactions not because you dislike people, but because being around them now feels overwhelming. Their words carry a heavier weight. Their energy lingers within your aura. You can enter a room and sense everything. The unspoken sadness people are concealing, the tension arising from suppressed truths, the pervasive noise behind every attempt at small talk. Suddenly, pretending not to notice becomes an impossible feat. Your empathy, once manageable, now runs so deep that you feel as though you're absorbing the pain of others. You might even question your own sanity, wondering why everything affects you so profoundly, why everything suddenly matters so much. However, you're not losing control. You're gaining a heightened level of awareness. This awareness, when it first dawns, is rarely gentle or comforting. We're conditioned to perceive sensitivity as a weakness. We're told to toughen up, develop a thick skin, stop overthinking, and suppress our emotions. But what if it's not that you're too sensitive? What if it's that the world is too loud, too artificial, and too disconnected for your newly awakened nervous system? You weren't meant to be numb. You were never intended to simply survive the noise. You were meant to listen to life, to people, and to your own inner voice in a way that's authentic, that requires sensitivity, that demands presence, and that necessitates solitude. This is why so many who embark on a spiritual awakening are drawn to silence, not because they're antisocial, but because the world they once knew now feels like overwhelming static. Silence becomes their medicine. Stillness becomes their source of clarity. Within that stillness, you begin to learn how to manage the intensity of your emotions. You start to differentiate between your own energy and the energy of others. You realize that your nervous system isn't failing, it's adapting to a new frequency. This is where meditation transcends being merely a technique. It becomes a necessity, not to escape the world, but to process it, to navigate through it without becoming overwhelmed. Meditation provides you with the space to feel without reacting, to observe without absorbing. It serves as your anchor in a sea of constant noise. As you delve deeper into your inner world, you become less attached to the external chaos. You stop trying to suppress your feelings and instead begin to learn from them. They're not the problem, they're your guides. This intensity of sensitivity isn't intended to ruin your life, it's intended to awaken your life, to draw you out of numbness and into a state of presence, to ignite your passion and make you truly care, not just passively exist. Yes, it can feel heavy. Yes, it can be uncomfortable, but it's also sacred. It's your soul's way of reminding you that you're not here to blend in. You're here to feel your way into something deeper, into something true. There comes a moment in your awakening when you gaze into a mirror and feel as though you're staring at a stranger, not because your physical appearance has changed, but because the person behind your eyes no longer aligns with the identity you once clung to. The labels, the ambitions, the personality traits that once defined you begin to crumble and fall away. In their place, a profound sense of stillness emerges. You're no longer the person you once were, but you haven't yet fully embraced the person you're destined to become. It's an unsettling in-between state, and no one truly discusses the disorientation that accompanies letting go of the self you've spent a lifetime constructing. This isn't simply a change in perspective, it's a death the death of the false self, the version of you that was shaped by external expectations, cultural conditioning, the pursuit of validation, and underlying fears. This is the version that was praised for being agreeable, attractive, productive, or impressive. The one that knew how to fit in, but never felt fully at peace. As spiritual awakening commences, that self begins to dissolve not abruptly, but gradually in fragmented pieces. You lose interest in pursuits that once captivated you. You begin to question goals you once sacrificed everything to achieve. You reflect upon your past life and wonder, was that ever truly me? This unraveling can be terrifying at first because identity provides a sense of comfort, even when it's limiting. You understood who you were expected to be, what you were supposed to say, and how you were meant to act. Now, the scripts no longer resonate. You're no longer interested in performing. Yet, without the old version of yourself to rely on, you may feel exposed, empty, and undefined. This is the void that many people resist and avoid. It's why some retreat into distractions, addictions, or old patterns, anything to escape the deafening silence of not knowing who they truly are. However, that silence is precisely where your true self begins to emerge and speak its truth. There's a valid reason why this process feels akin to grief. You're mourning the loss of an illusion, the identity you crafted to feel safe and secure, the masks that garnered you praise, and the persona that knew how to succeed within a system that rewards the inauthentic. Like any form of grief, it comes in waves: denial, anger, bargaining, and sadness. You'll yearn for the comfort of being understood, even if you were only understood as a false representation of yourself. You'll miss the security of predictability, even if that predictability came at the expense of your soul. The people around you may not comprehend what's happening. They'll observe that you're quieter, more introspective, and more difficult to decipher. Some may accuse you of changing, and they'll be correct. But it's a change they can't easily follow unless they're willing to confront their own illusions. This is what makes this stage of the journey so profoundly isolating. You're shedding layers that most people aren't even consciously aware they're wearing. That kind of transformation can make others uncomfortable because your authenticity serves as a mirror reflecting their own avoidance. This isn't the end, it's the genesis of liberation. Once you accept that you're not defined by your labels, your achievements, or your reputation, you create space for the emergence of truth. A deeper, more authentic identity begins to take shape, one not based on external perceptions, but on how you feel when you're alone, unmasked, and completely honest. This identity is fluid, evolving, and vibrant. It's not a brand, a box, or a construct designed for approval. It's a state of being aligned with your truest self. You're not lost. You're undergoing a rewriting of your very essence. The confusion you feel now isn't evidence that something is wrong. It's proof that something false is in the process of dying. From the ashes of your old self, a truer you is rising, one that doesn't need to perform to belong, one that doesn't need to be liked to feel whole, and one that finally understands that relinquishing what was never real isn't a tragedy. It's a homecoming. There comes a point when ordinary conversations begin to feel unbearable. You find yourself sitting across from someone, nodding politely and smiling at the appropriate cues, but internally, you're suffocating. The words being spoken sound familiar: weekend plans, television shows, gossip, complaints about work, but none of them touch anything real or meaningful. You attempt to remain present, to demonstrate genuine interest, but your mind inevitably drifts, and your chest tightens, not from boredom, but from a quiet agony that whispers, "This isn't it anymore." This isn't arrogance, nor is it a belief that you're superior to others. It's simply that something fundamental within you has shifted, and you can't deny its profound impact. You've tasted truth, perhaps only a fleeting glimpse, but that was enough. Once you've experienced even a sliver of what it feels like to connect soul, to speak from your inner knowing, or to share in a silence that conveys more than 1,000 cleverly constructed sentences ever could, you can't revert to scripted exchanges. The performance of casual connection feels akin to consuming cardboard after having once savored truly nourishing sustenance. Spiritual awakening alters your appetite for connection. It strips away the need for superficial pleasantries and replaces it with a deep hunger for something raw, authentic, and meaningful. You crave conversations that aren't necessarily safe, but are undeniably sincere. You desire to discuss purpose, pain, healing, the unseen realms, and the profound mysteries of existence. You long to ask questions that provoke thoughtful contemplation rather than eliciting mere reactions. You seek the company of individuals who don't flinch when you delve into deeper subjects, who aren't unnerved by silence, and who aren't terrified of confronting their own thoughts and vulnerabilities. This isn't because you require constant intensity. It's because you can no longer pretend that surface-level interactions are sufficient. This shift is often misunderstood by those around you. People might suggest that you've become distant or difficult to communicate with. But the truth is that you're no longer willing to expend your energy in empty, unfulfilling spaces. You're not interested in managing someone else's discomfort by diminishing your own truth. You're no longer willing to perform emotional labor solely to avoid awkwardness. The awkwardness, you've come to realize, is often the fertile ground where something genuinely real might begin to blossom. You'll begin to discern which relationships were founded on shared truths and which were merely held together by shared distractions. When those distractions cease to hold your interest, the connection inevitably begins to weaken and dissolve. You can't force it to return. You can't convincingly feign enthusiasm for something you've outgrown, and you shouldn't have to. There's a sense of liberation that accompanies this realization. Initially, it might feel like isolation, but in time, you'll understand that it's a gateway to something purer and more authentic. A life where your relationships mirror your values, a space where your words are rooted in genuine meaning, and a reality where you're surrounded by individuals who challenge you to remain awake and conscious rather than lulling you back into a state of numbness. It all begins with honesty, first with yourself, then with others. You're not obligated to feign interest. You don't have to force connections. You shouldn't apologize for craving depth and meaning. You're allowed to withdraw from noise and superficiality, even when it wears a friendly face. You have the right to protect your energy as though it were sacred, because it is. As you cease performing for others, the world around you begins to rearrange itself. The invitations you once accepted out of guilt or fear will gradually fade away. The people who only knew the edited version of you will drift out of your life, but something else will take their place. Slowly, quietly, you'll begin to attract individuals who speak your language, communicating not just with their words, but with their very presence. These are the people who don't require a performance to feel close, who aren't intimidated by the weight of truth. They may be fewer in number, but they will be profoundly real. And after everything you've endured, genuine connection is more than sufficient. There's a profound stillness that descends after everything begins to fall away, after the friends start to fade. The old goals lose their meaning, and the external world no longer tempts you to return to a state of pretense. It leaves behind an emptiness, yes, but that emptiness isn't a void. It's an open space, and space is where something new can begin. Initially, it might feel as though no one truly understands you. You start to become acutely aware of how alone you are in your thoughts, your values, and your unique way of perceiving the world. You yearn for connection, but you no longer possess the energy for anything superficial. You desire something real, conversations that don't feel like strategic negotiations, friendships that don't require you to filter yourself into something more palatable, and individuals who don't perceive your depth as overwhelming intensity, but as a familiar and comforting presence. That longing within your heart isn't a weakness. It's a compass, a testament to the fact that your heart remains open, even after all that you've experienced. You're not seeking to accumulate more acquaintances. You're seeking to connect with the right people, those who feel like a breath of fresh air rather than a cacophony of noise, those who can make silence feel complete and fulfilling, who listen attentively without formulating their responses, and who truly see you without needing to be persuaded. These individuals aren't always easy to find, not because they're rare, but because they're often obscured beneath the noise of the performative, the distracted, and the fear-driven. To find them, you must first relinquish everything that wasn't aligned with your authentic self. The most sacred relationships often emerge in the aftermath of your solitude, not during the peak of your popularity, but in the quiet sanctuary of your authenticity. These are the individuals who resonate with your truth, not your carefully crafted image, who don't require you to diminish yourself, censor your words, or compartmentalize your growth in order to maintain their comfort. They're not threatened by your evolution, they're inspired by it. When you finally encounter them, something within you relaxes because for the first time in a long time, you're not performing. It might require patience, and the waiting can feel excruciating when you're immersed in the void, but never underestimate what that time is accomplishing. It's refining your energetic frequency, stripping away the remnants of your being that were still clinging to external validation at the expense of your own truth. You're being prepared on an energetic level to meet others who are undergoing a similar transformation. When your paths finally converge, the connection won't be based on shared history or mutual convenience. It will be built upon a foundation of deep resonance. That kind of connection can't be forced or manufactured. It's a visceral experience. You'll know it when it happens. There won't be fireworks or grand pronouncements, just a profound sense of peace and presence, a feeling of being seen and known in a way that feels both ancient and effortless, like remembering someone you hadn't yet met, like returning to something you didn't realize you were missing until it finally arrived. To experience that caliber of connection, you had to relinquish the relationships that depended on your inauthenticity to survive. You had to endure the loneliness, the self-doubt, and the profound longing. You had to sit with yourself long enough to understand what truth actually feels like. Now that you possess that inner compass, you can intuitively sense when someone else is rooted in their own truth. That's what makes it real and enduring. You're not behind schedule. You're not lagging behind others. You're not inherently too much or not enough. You're simply early in a process that most people actively avoid throughout their entire lives. Consequently, the connections you forge from this point forward will be fundamentally different. They'll be grounded in growth, not stagnation, in truth, not mere tolerance. They won't require lengthy explanations or justifications. They'll simply feel right. You're not destined to navigate this path alone indefinitely, but you are meant to traverse certain segments of it in solitude so you can discover who you are without external influences, so that when others enter your life, they encounter the authentic you. Not a performance, not a projection, but a person who has tasted the depths of their own silence and emerged stronger. Maintain your faith in the process. Continue to honor the quiet moments. The people who are meant to be in your life aren't behind you. They're ahead, traveling along the same road, moving in your direction. When they finally arrive, you'll understand why the waiting was necessary, why the solitude was sacred, and why you had to relinquish the crowd to discover your true circle. The transformation doesn't unfold all at once. There's no single dramatic moment where everything clicks into place, no clearly defined milestone that signifies you've made it. Instead, one day, without any fanfare, you simply awaken and feel a little lighter. You realize that you haven't been pretending lately. You notice that the silence no longer feels empty, but rather profoundly full. You're not clinging to old connections or chasing outdated dreams. You're simply existing in a state of effortless presence. Within that state of being, there is immeasurable peace. That peace didn't come without a price. You relinquished things along the way, people, roles, identities, comforts. You questioned yourself more times than you can count. You sat in spaces that felt overwhelmingly silent and wondered if you had erred in withdrawing from the noise. You yearned for individuals who were never meant to stay, and you clung to versions of yourself that were never genuinely yours. Yet here you stand, not fully healed, not entirely complete, but undeniably present. For the first time in a long time, that presence is enough. You begin to understand that you were never truly losing anything. You were simply returning to something quieter, truer, and more authentically yours. The friends who departed, the ones you left behind, and the social circles you no longer feel aligned with, it wasn't rejection. It was redirection, not punishment, but protection. When your soul finds its voice, not everyone can remain in your inner circle. That's not an act of cruelty, it's an act of profound clarity. You were never meant to be everything to everyone. You were never intended to keep performing in order to retain people in your life. You weren't placed here to win the approval of a world that doesn't even understand itself. You're here to remember who you are beneath all the layers of conditioning, to return home to the part of yourself that doesn't need to prove, explain, or entertain in order to be worthy of love. What you're constructing now is something that most people never dare to attempt, a life of alignment, where your friendships are chosen based on truth, not fear. A path where your time, energy, and attention are given intentionally, not out of obligation. A presence that radiates wholeness, not perfection, but genuine integrity. This is the kind of life that may not always appear impressive from an external perspective, but it feels deeply rooted and grounded within. No, it won't always be easy. There will still be moments of longing, days when the world feels distant, and you'll question whether it would be simpler to revert to your old ways. However, you've now tasted the truth. You've experienced what it's like to be authentically real, and once that transformation has occurred, nothing less will ever truly satisfy you. This journey isn't about achieving isolation. It's about achieving profound clarity, no longer confusing company with genuine connection, attention with authentic affection, or comfort with true compatibility. It's about trusting that the person you're evolving into is worth the space it takes to emerge, and that the people who are meant to be in your life won't require you to dim your light in order to be close. If you're still in the midst of this process, still sitting in the quiet and wondering when it will become easier, trust this. You're not behind schedule, you're not lost, you're not strange, you're simply awakening. That path isn't linear, but it is undeniably sacred. Every moment of self-doubt you've experienced, every tear you've shed, and every space you've walked away from when your soul whispered, "Not here," has contributed to your journey. It's all part of your becoming. Allow yourself to unfold without rushing, to grieve without guilt, and to bloom without apology. You're not here to fit in. You're here to become whole. So, if any of this resonated with you, remember this. You're not broken, you're awakening. It might feel lonely sometimes, shedding those old layers and stepping into a more authentic version of yourself, but trust that it's all part of a beautiful, profound transformation. You're creating space for a life filled with deeper connection and genuine meaning. I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. Have you ever felt this sense of disconnection or experienced a spiritual awakening? Share your stories, ask your questions, or just say hello in the comments below. Let's create a supportive community where we can all navigate this journey together. And if you enjoyed this exploration, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future conversations about growth, authenticity, and living a more soulful life. Thanks for being here, and remember, you're exactly where you need to be.